Thank you very much and welcome to our session on rethinking ports as hubs and how they can change the future. I have a very distinguished panel here. I would like to introduce first Kiril Petkov, the former Prime Minister of Bulgaria. We unfortunately have to wait a little bit longer for Asen Vasilev, the current Minister of Finance of Bulgaria, and of course to the Prime Minister's left and to your side, you will see John Charalambakis, who I will introduce in a second. Unfortunately, I have to excuse Emmanuel Mautsakas, who is sick, but he sends us his regards, and we will unfortunately have only one Greek-American defender for the Greek ports, but I'm sure, as I know John, he will be very tough and strong on that. Also, thank you to the Greek House of Davos, especially to Irene Vantzaraki and her team for hosting us and for running this session. My name is Barbara Kolm. No, first to Irene. My name is Barbara Kolm, and I have the privilege to manage the three gentlemen here. Interestingly enough, and I'm not going into details with regards to their CV and background, but all of them move between academics and business and have a long track record in research and in universities, actively teaching and researching and founding institutes. And with one additional exemption, Professor Charalambakis also is in the finance world, whereas our two Bulgarian friends are very active in politics, and the Prime Minister, Mr. Petkov, has founded We Continue the Change Party, which is running currently, and as you all know, the Bulgarians have a very interesting system with rotations in their governments, but he and Asen have been founding this party and very successfully running it. So without further ado, I would simply ask the gentleman to, and I will start with Prime Minister Petkov, to give us his thoughts and ideas of what ports and hubs can do with regards to strategy for Greece, Bulgaria, Southeast Europe, and also covering not only trade facilitation, economic growth, transshipment and logistics, energy security, sometimes even a little bit of tourism, but especially the strategic connectivity. And we have been discussing this for the entire day in one way or the other, directly and indirectly. But ports are and have historically been a place where we ignite change. The floor is yours.
So, first of all, it's very nice to see so many friends in the audience here, and I'm very thankful for the organizers to make this event happen. I think something very exciting is happening in the Balkans, and especially among Greece, Bulgaria, and we're trying to further it to Romania and going north. Traditionally, as we all know, the connections were always happening east to west. Now, here is my friend Asen as well.
Pleasure to have you here. Please take a seat. I already took the liberty of introducing you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, he's just coming from the airport directly for his first event. So traditionally, east-west was the usual routes that were happening in the Balkans due to the fact that, of course, the border between Bulgaria and Greece was part of the Iron Curtain in a way. And what is happening now for the first time, and maybe due to what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, but we start to understand how important is the south-north connections. So much so is that furthermore we understand that talking about security and the Black Sea, which we know that currently there are significant risks associated there, and of course these risks could potentially be transferred relatively easily to the Bosphorus. More and more the connectivity between the Mediterranean through Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, all the way to Ukraine becomes not only an important factor for the economy, but also for national security. And we envisioned, and we started 2 years ago together to have these links not just as a good discussion, but in reality. The first such a significant link that happened was the gas interconnector between Greece and Bulgaria, as well as the LNG terminal co-investment in Greece. For the first time, we became fully independent of Russian gas, and the connectivity there happened. Now we are continuing further, and this is where the topic of this discussion today comes about. It all starts from the ports. The ports on the Mediterranean could be transformational for the region if we're able to create value together on it. If up to now we are looking them as Greek ports, they're almost local. If you go to Alexandroupolis, for example, there is it's a small town, small city with a small port. But now imagine, what if we have 3 bridges on the Danube all the way to Romania? What if the cargo shipments happen from Romania, Bulgaria, all the way to Alexandroupolis? What if we have both oil, rail, road, gas, as we have, electricity, and we start using the synergies that in all these years, synergies that were never really explored. In fact, during lunch today, we had this discussion that would be the first real example in the Balkans where we're not just talking, we're not talking about history, we're not talking about geopolitics, we're talking about economics and economic synergies. Things like, simple things, like the peak in Greece for electricity is in the summer during the day. The peak in Bulgaria is in the winter during the night. Putting the two systems together, huge amount of efficiencies. So I think we're on the verge of transformational kind of economic development in the Balkans, especially Greece, Bulgaria, Romania. Hopefully we can get really connected as the EU accession continues with the Western Balkans as well. Because when you draw the line, we're 65 million people in the Balkans. We never think about it as 65 million people, but if you think about it as 65 million people that can unleash the synergies that have been embedded throughout the whole time, but due to politics, due to history, due to all the other elements, they were not unleashed, we actually have the opportunity to have economic growth in these regions in the upper 7-8% if we're able to do this. So I'm really excited to be sitting next to both of these gentlemen on both sides of me, because John has been truly a kind of a visionary in how the Greek ports can transform this transformation that I'm talking about, and could be the unlocking catalyst for this to happen. And Asen currently is, as we speak, trying to make them happen, and actually these ports to be not just discussions, but a real material contracts to be created, so this happens. And the final point for the introduction I want to make is that it's also, in order for this to happen, we have to think about shared value. In order for these transformational changes to happen in infrastructure, in working together, exploring politics, all the parties involved should feel that they all share the value. Because creating shared value in this process would make it happen politically. Because, of course, we all know that there is an actor on the east of all of us that would not love to see this happen. I mean, this is national security for us, it's a national security risk for them, or at least dependency that they used to control for a long time, they would no longer have. So we should not allow very smart adversaries to this strategy to stop it. And the best way to do it is to show the shared value to the populations that are backing us, so that everybody cannot say, oh, this is political decision. No. This is value-creating decision for the business. This is value-creating decision for the populations of all of these countries. And therefore, the design of these contracts and these relationships should be with clear idea of shared value. So with this, I'll give the floor to my colleagues.
Thank you very much. An applause, please. So as you mentioned, it's not only north-south, it's east-west, and you really focus on the economic synergies, and shared value is added value for everybody. And this is, I think, what we need in the Southeast Balkans and in Southeast Europe. So without further ado, our Minister of Finance from Bulgaria, Mr. Asen Vasilev, the floor is yours. And I'm sorry for rushing you into the panel right from the airport, but that's how Davos is. No break for anybody.
No problem. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm actually very encouraged to see such a packed house for the audience. My trip was Brussels, Vienna, and Davos in that order, which more or less is all related to what we're discussing here. As a finance minister, I guess I have to give you some numbers so you can kind of see how this works. The Bulgarian-Turkish border currently is the second busiest land border in the world after US-Mexico. The amount of cargo that goes through the border is absolutely insane. That border crossing, one of the border crossings, sees 4,000 trucks per day, in addition to train traffic, in addition to cars, buses, vans, and everything else. I'm just talking about the trucks. And that has been increasing 20 to 30% year over year, especially now with the war in Ukraine. All the traffic from Middle Asia basically is coming down through the southern corridor. In addition to that, we see that the Bosphorus is continually congested. And part of the reason for that is that the amount of traffic that goes into the Black Sea is substantially increased, and also the blockage of the corridor through Ukraine for Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, all of that's now blocked. That used to go, because of the Soviet Union, it used to go up north and then west. And then the traffic between Bulgaria and Greece has been increasing dramatically as well. Basically, Western Bulgaria uses Thessaloniki as its port, rather than Burgas and Varna, which are in Bulgaria. And I have to say they use Thessaloniki despite the lack of infrastructure, because the rail line goes down to 40 kilometers an hour at some points on the Greek part. Our part is electrified, single, but average speed about 70, 80 kilometers an hour, so it's not nearly as good as it should be. Where we are connecting with Alexandroupolis and also with Turkey in Svilengrad on our side, it's double electrified, 160 kilometers an hour. And we have that built out quite a bit. We're completing that up north, connecting to Romania, and we're building a complete new highway from Ruse up north all the way down to Makaza and connecting to Via Ignatia in Greece, so we can catch both Kavala and Alexandroupoli and Thessaloniki, quite frankly, with that highway. That's already in the works. On the highway side, we started construction on the first 70 kilometers. It's 350 total. The other 70 is on the bid procedures, and the rest we're doing the design for. On the rail, as I said, it's upgrades on 2 of the lots, and 1 of the lot needs to be built. The total project on the Bulgarian side is going to be about 6 billion euros, and we've already started planning that in our budgets. On the Greek side, I talked to the Greek finance minister and the government. The road is only 20 kilometers on the Greek side, the highway, so that's not a problem. The railway update is going to be about 600 million euros, and they're applying to the CEF2 facility, which an application which we're supporting. So we hope that will also be kicked off this year. So from purely kind of numbers perspective, we're in the process of finalizing a government-to-government, international government agreement with the Greek government, where all of that is put in place. And we're also talking to the Romanians on how we continue that infrastructure up north. In terms of traffic, the traffic is there. The existing traffic alone is more than enough to fill up the ports with the expansions. And we see massive increase in traffic that goes through the Balkans. What we've seen also with the traffic used to go in the old Via Militaris, Istanbul-Vienna road, Bulgaria, Serbia, Hungary, all the way up to Vienna. And that's how the major highways were built back in the day, all the way back from Roman times. But what we see right now is that on the Bulgarian-Serbian border, which is along this route, the traffic is much smaller than the secondary border crossing with Turkey, not the primary. So more than 80% of the traffic that comes from South, Greece or Turkey, goes through Romania now, as opposed to going to Serbia. And the reason is people don't want to leave the EU and re-enter the EU. Even though the infrastructure is better through the Serbia-Hungary, Austria route, most of the traffic gets routed through Romania, so that's also a point to expand there. And we had the 3 prime ministers meet in Varna last fall with a joint declaration, and the Romanians are also going to be building out their piece of the infrastructure. So it's happening, it's exciting. That's on the transport corridor side. On the energy side, we doubled our electricity interconnect, and we are further increasing that. We have the gas interconnect right now at 5 BCM with Greece and about 20 BCM with Turkey. We're about to double the connectivity with Greece to about 10 BCM. And to give you an idea what that means, between the Greek and Turkish feed points, and we've repurposed the old Russian pipeline that used to go from the Soviet Union down to Greece and Turkey, the Trans-Balkan, now we're using it back south to north. And our system is on a ring, which means that we can move from any point to any point on the system. So the national gas system. So Bulgaria basically right now transships about as much gas from southern direction into Europe, almost as much as Nord Stream. And at the end of this year, my understanding is that the agreement between Russia and Ukraine for transit expires, which means that the main pipeline that goes Russia, Ukraine, Slovakia, Hungary, and then Vienna would also stop being used, which basically means that this is going to be the main route that's not fully blocked to get gas into Europe. So pretty exciting stuff. And we can talk a lot more about how the business is organizing all of that and using all of that. But I think for the first time, we are starting to see kind of real strategic cooperation on those issues. And there is not only willingness, but pretty fast actions as far as governments are concerned on both sides.
Thank you very much. Asen, thank you also for mentioning that the Bulgarian-Turkish border is right now the second busiest in the world, and because we keep forgetting that, and this is such a geostrategic hub, and the importance thereof needs to be constantly considered if we want to make sure that there are no shortages in transportation means. And thanks for providing us with the numbers and the data. And we hope that everything is within our budget, within the budgets, and that I don't know how much EU money is going into that as well, but I'm sure there will be. And also important, and I'm sure John will pick up on that. You mentioned the old Roman highways, and history, after all, plays a big role when we look into those ports. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Now, it's a very difficult attempt to follow those wonderful presentations, so please excuse my presentation. First World War and Second World War were lost because of logistics. Now, if we don't have logistics, we cannot win neither an economic war nor a real war. And I'm privileged to be sitting on the same stage with these two gentlemen. Isaac Newton taught us if we can see clear in the future, it's because we are standing on the shoulders of giants. And these two gentlemen are giants. If Ukraine was able to survive the first 3 months of the war, that infamous day of February 22nd, 2022, is because of those two gentlemen who did all the logistics for Ukraine to support the military efforts. Now, hubs eventually shape our destiny. And if you want to look at what happened to Venice, or what happened to Rotterdam, London, Athens, Greece, that stopped the Persian Empire, what happened to Hamburg, or what happens these days to Dubai or Shanghai, is because of the ports. So ports shape our destiny. Now, what do ports control? I remember the current Undersecretary of State, former American ambassador to Greece, Jeffrey Pyatt. When he and I met back in early 2019, he says, John, can you do a basic study and tell me when we move grains from Ukraine through the Bosporus, and then if we move them through the Varna port down to Greece, if there are any cost savings? He's a great man. So I did my homework, and I found out that the savings could exceed 60%. So hubs eventually control efficiency. So what do ports do? Why ports are so important? 4 things. It's a hub for trade and logistics. Number 2, it supports national security. Number 3, it's a hub for energy. Number 4, it's a hub for food security. And let's not kid ourselves. A food crisis is coming. And where people are going to be very hungry. Unless we prepare for the food crisis that's coming in the next 10 years, then we're going to die. And ports are extremely important in securing food facilities. Now, when we have good ports, 3 things happen. We have financial development, we have good and stable jobs, and that leads to the middle class. Let's not forget, without a middle class, there is no democracy. Try to find any country that is democratic and doesn't have a middle class, or vice versa. The purpose of democracy is to create and sustain a viable middle class. Now, ports are also hubs for power. What is power? Power is the ability to extract, number 1, value, number 2, influence, and number 3, a network. So ports are extremely important if you want to have power, and everybody wants to have power. Let's not kid ourselves. So we live in a geopolitical and geoeconomic warfare zone, and the tensions are rising. So we have belligerent actors, we have no respect for the rule of law, and absolutely no respect for human and civil rights. So because we have these belligerent actors, the risks are rising, both the political risks, but also the financial risks. And it's good to have just risk. Unfortunately, nowadays we have uncertainties. So in this time, we have strategic competition among major powers, huge debts, and not enough collateral to finance our debts. That's exactly the picture of 1914. Maybe during the Q&A we'll have more opportunity to discuss about this. My warning is, a major war is coming. Get ready.
John, I'm not surprised that you end up with 208, because this has been something that you've been working on for a very long time. And by the way, he needs an applause. But you mentioned most importantly the financial risks, and I'm sure we will go back to that. But you said also that we are now living in a time of uncertainty. But let me quote Hayek. I mean, we never have full information, and it's arrogance to claim to have. So we should be a little bit more humble and say we know that there are certain things that we will never, anticipate. We can only have an arrangement. But now let's go to the questions. And I would like to start with the Prime Minister and asking his first question, since we're now on the economic track as well. And I would ask you, how can you transform a normal port into a regional hub that is really creating economic growth? And it was mentioned by the Finance Minister and by John as well, how important not only the middle class is, but, this the creation of jobs and the economic security that you need as a prime minister to run your country.
That's a good question. Now I'll switch a little bit, even though your question was about economics, I'll switch it back to politics, because in this case the two are so intertwined. Why did, even though we've been part of the EU, for example, from 2007. Bulgaria has been, Romania has been as well. It's been quite a few years. Why is it only happening now? Why are we talking about Alexandroupolis as though we just discovered it yesterday? I'll give you two insights of what's happening on the Balkans, and this is part of the real things that we have to overcome that are totally not on the surface. For example, the interconnection that I mentioned, the Greek interconnection that we were able to do for 8 months, it was planned and designed for about 12 years beforehand. For 12 years, somehow we couldn't build 150 kilometers pipe. At the same time, the Turkish stream happened from Turkey across Bulgaria all the way to Serbia within 3 years. Why?
350 kilometers.
350 kilometers, more than double. And it happened so fast, no environmental studies stopped it, everything was perfect.
Yeah, there were no ferrets along the way.
Yeah, so I'll leave you with this question. Then a second thing is, why would we have 500-kilometer border with Romania on the Danube and have only 2 bridges?
Yeah.
Why is it happening? Why when Danube, by the way, I don't know if you know about Danube on this side of between Bulgaria and Romania, but it's only 8 meters deep. It's not like we have to do some engineering marvelous thing. It's a highway with that is pretty much lifted 15 meters with maybe some opening here and there. It's not something so revolutionary. It's not even expensive. So why is it happening? So I'll give you a little insight back to the politics side of it. So we speak with our Romanian counterparts, and they said for 30 years, Bulgaria never wanted to deepen the Danube, and we never wanted to give you the bridges. Yeah. The bridges would give comparative advantage to Greece and Bulgarian ports, while we were saying to them, apparently, that deepening the Danube would give them an advantage on the river transportation to Romania. How dumb is that? We have, out of this amazing strategy, we have 2 bridges and a Danube that you cannot use throughout the whole year, depending, and every day at 3 o'clock we have to listen at the water level table. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And so, but the truth is, the issue is deeper. In all of our countries, and this is really the fight that we started, there is what we call, to a degree, permanent power that has foreign influence. And you can find it in places like security services of all these countries. You can find it in the number of employees in the embassy of Russia. For example, do you know that there are only 25 employees in the Netherlands, in the embassy of Russia in the Netherlands, but there were 118 in Bulgaria, and I think similar number in Greece. And I'm pretty sure a similar number in Romania. What are 118 people doing all day long? And when we looked at in our government, we actually found out the answer. 70 of them were GRU agents. And if you remember, a year ago, we sent 70 back to Moscow on 2 planes. And the thing is, what is happening is this coordination in the Balkans. It's not a random case. It's not like nobody thought about it. There was a very clear strategy that was coordinated, I believe, very much with Russia, that was making sure that these countries look like islands by themselves. Because knowing that if they stop looking like islands and they start realizing the potential of the synergy between them, the control is lost. For example, this little investment of 150 kilometer pipeline made us go from 95% dependency on Russian gas to 0. So imagine how you can now make the Bulgarian population fear and tell them, if you don't cooperate with Russia, you're going to freeze to death during the winter.
Yeah, we did.
That was a big threat all these years. Now, if you say to an average Bulgarian, we'll stop the Russian gas, it's already stopped. But even if you say we'll stop the Russian oil, everybody's like, they stopped the Russian gas for 24 hours, nothing happened. Why? Because we already knew that this interconnection, we can play along and we can get the gas. Imagine now we can say the following, we don't care so much about what's happening in what they call sometimes the Russian lake, the Black Sea, because now we have full connectivity and we can get, for example, our oil, our logistics through these ports on the Mediterranean. And what if we say even more? It's not about Greece allowing us to use the ports. What if we say we have co-ownership? How about that? We actually agree to get a tenant and a partner that guarantees joint cooperation and joint ownership, let's say for 6 years or for a number of years. How does it look at this? How do you play the political strategies to disrupt the coordination if this is why I talk so much about shared value. If we can design these contracts that everybody feels invested and embedded, the whole political games start to fade away because the economics would work. And we know business. For example, before going to politics, I was exporting. I was one of those Bulgarian companies that was exporting through Thessaloniki. Why? Because it saved me 10 days for my US shipments because I was shipping to the US. And it was a couple of thousand euros cheaper. With this infrastructure we didn't have a highway, we don't have a good railway moving at 40 kilometers. I can only imagine the efficiency that this will happen if we have highways and railways. And now, some people would say, but what about your ports? If we have the amazing links of railway construction between, let's say, the port of Varna and the port of Alexandroupolis, I mean, there are all kinds of possibilities. We can be shipping from Georgia, we can be shipping from Ukraine one day. It can be going on train, going to the Mediterranean. We have an alternative to the Bosphorus. There are all kinds of externalities that are not even on the direct business proposal that are happening. And if we do this imagine now increasing the EU accession on the Western Balkans, and we start getting these populations part of this game. I think the Balkans have the potential to be the highest growth area in Europe if we put this together. And unfortunately for our Ukrainian friends, they had to do the fight for us to be able to start this, because we know that when Russia is distracted, usually the Balkans grow faster. So we are on the verge of making a difference. And what we also understand is that in all these strategies, you have to learn first to walk before you run. And now the key point is to make one really successful port, connections, connectivity link, and then we'll start increasing. I'm sure that once all the security services see that their risk warnings of amazing disruption once we build bridges and build infrastructure does not happen on the first and the second bridge, I'm sure we can have fourth and fifth bridge right away. I mean, we're talking about 150 million. And what Asen is saying here, and this is the first finance minister who we don't even ask for money. We actually, he says we have it. I mean, 150 million is nothing for a bridge. 200 million. I mean, we can run these numbers on our own balance sheet without an issue. It's just about start to thinking together. It's about forums like this one, where people can share these ideas and realizing that history is history, the future is ours.
Thank you very much, Kiril. Asen, labor and business location first. Creation of revenues for the government. What can ports and hubs do? Do you think of special economic zones, special privileges? What would you envision if you could do everything right now and as a Bulgarian without taking care of what the EU will prohibit or might prohibit?
I don't think the EU would prohibit much, quite
That's
frankly. When I was in Vienna earlier this morning, I was talking to the investors that invest in the Bulgarian sovereign debt at Euromoney conference. And I casually mentioned that our personal income tax rate is 10% and our corporate income tax rate is 10% flat. And it's not about the EU.
And it has been there for a very long time, and thank you for doing that.
That way since 2008, 1 year after we joined the EU. So if you talk about special economic zones, Bulgaria as a whole is one big special economic zone. Basically similar size too, if you think about it, right? I mean, try getting 10% flat tax rate in anywhere else in Europe, right? I think the Hungarians are trying to do it at 9.9, right. But then they hit you on the back with a bunch of other taxes. That's one piece of it. But the other piece of what we are really seeing is that when economic activity increases, there are no problems for tax revenues, but more importantly, the value add actually increases as well, because a lot of the value right now of, let's say, what's produced in Bulgaria is lost due to logistics, either towards the EU or out. If we fix the logistics, our estimate, for example, just getting rid of making sure we have the land border Schengen, not just the air Schengen, is between 3 and 5% of GDP. That's the immediate impact. Within 2 years, we are going to see 3 to 5% increase in GDP just by unblocking that one logistical problem. And that's without creating any new infrastructure. Now, if we actually improve the infrastructure, make it much easier for companies to not even think, right? If you're in Western Europe, you don't really think about the logistics. You know, you have a decent rail, decent highway to a port that's probably within 100 kilometers. And if you're in the Balkans, logistics is half of your game, both local and the international logistics. I think that's extremely important to kind of fix and take away as a problem for the business. And the other thing is, we've already seen it. The amount of Romanian tourists that come to Bulgaria, the amount of Bulgarian tourists that go to Greece. I think the countries are already seeing that tourism traffic benefiting greatly, and I think that's only going to increase once we put, for example, decent trains. Mm-hmm. There is no train right now between Ruse and Bucharest. And all of Russia is using Bucharest's airports, and that's 80 kilometers. And putting a decent train that can get you in 1 hour from one city to the other probably would double the amount of people who do that and make it much easier. Same thing we're doing in Bulgaria. We're putting fast trains so that we can move. For example, we now have the infrastructure. It turns out we don't have the trains themselves, but the Plovdiv, which is the second largest Bulgarian city, to Edirne, the closest Turkish city on the other side of the border, is 1 hour, 10 minutes. And we have the rails to do it. We don't have the trains to do it yet. Hopefully in a few months we'll have it. Turkey is building out the train line, so Plovdiv to Istanbul is going to be 3 hours by train. That completely changes tourism, business, absolutely everything. And I think that's where we have to start thinking of how do we stitch the countries better. And if we think about what's happening in Western Europe and what happened post-World War II, the main thing that happened were the highway system, the railway system. Same thing with the US. The interstate highway system basically completely linked the country in a way that that if Europe had, we would be in a very different economic situation.
Thank you very much, Asen. Following up on that infrastructure and especially ownership, also public partnerships, or maybe even denationalization of ports and hubs, airports in Albania, ports in Greece and elsewhere. How do you think what will be the future on that front? What kind of financial collaborations will we see there? Will we see more government involvement in Europe, given especially those strategic crises that we see, the geopolitical challenges that we face? Will it be more government investment, or will it be private? How would you see that, John?
Hopefully it will be, at least in the beginning, a public-private initiative and collaboration in order to facilitate any dream that we have. And actually, it's not a dream, because what these two gentlemen are doing is not just a dream. They're implementing it. Overnight, they cut off Russian gas supplies. And nobody in Bulgaria had a problem. Right now, we are collaborating between Greek and Bulgarian ports, and we're going to moving cargo like never before, and the people will be saving money. However, in order to bring it to my previous points, my fear is that we are facing three things. Number one, the rule of the mob, the rule of the mafia. Number two, the rule of the oligarchy. And number three, the erosion of democracy. And those things are happening because even in my country, in the United States of America, the middle class is shrinking, and is shrinking fast. We need to stop that hemorrhage. We need to stop the shrinking of the middle class. If I may, I don't know if those, I have prepared 2 slides. I don't know if we can show them now.
Let's try. Yes.
Okay. So I think that in order to create and sustain a middle class, we need economic strength. So in the capital markets, in trade, in currency, we need military strength necessarily, and we need statecraft, whether that's soft power, diplomacy, or hard power, if it's needed, military. Now, if we have those things, then we build internal institutions which can eventually create the middle class. But what creates and sustains the middle class? Let me show you the next one. Oops. There are 4 things. There has to be rule of law. Without the rule of law, nothing happens. Number 2, we need physical infrastructure, what we have been talking about right now. If we don't have the bridges, if we don't have the roads, if we don't have the ports, nothing will happen. And remember, the physical infrastructure creates and sustains a middle class. Has good jobs, good paying jobs, not dead-end jobs. We need social infrastructure, we need schools, we need hospitals. And then we need financial and trade infrastructure. That's where the ports come. These are fundamental pieces for peaceful advancement. If we don't have those, unfortunately, our success will lead to corruption. Corruption will lead to corrosion. This is what's happening right now. And the only way out is a big war.
One thing I'll add to this picture, if I may.
Sure.
You need social agreement on how value is distributed.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that there is a certain amount of willingness to share for the people who are more productive with the people who are less productive. Because there will always be, just the way the world works and biology works, there are going to be people who, by luck or by chance or by skill, produce more value, and people who produce less value. Now, communism went the complete extreme and completely discouraged everybody because it expropriated everything. But I think unless there is shared prosperity and mobility for everybody in society, and mobility is the key, you should have a path to success regardless of where you start, and some basic shared value and shared resources, so you can actually build the social infrastructure, because there is a solidarity principle to that. And I think a lot of what we're seeing in Europe and what we're seeing in the US is that through globalization, a certain group of people, the people without college education, lost out. Between the tax breaks, which reduced the solidarity, and outsourcing jobs outside of the US and Europe, what we saw is that in all of these countries, there was a bifurcation and massive increase in inequality. And if you actually look at what you're saying, demise of democracy and inequality, I'm pretty certain there will be statistically significant link, and it's going to be pretty high. In Bulgaria, by the way, since we joined the EU, we had, I think, a very wrong economic policy. It did have its benefits. We didn't have debt, which is good. But other than that, we didn't actually produce high-quality growth, and we lost 1 million people in the span of 15 years. Emigrated out of the country, because if we look at the inequality, it was always increasing to the point where Bulgaria had the highest inequality in all of the EU. Since 21, we started picking up the bottom and investing in schools and hospitals. In addition to the physical capital investment, we've seen inequality shrink, and for the first time in 2022, we had a net positive migration back to the country of Bulgarian citizens. It was only 8,000 people, but the trend was turned.
Congratulations.
I'm waiting for the 23 numbers to see what's happening there.
And I would just, because I see that the time is running and I have to, we have to go on for the next meeting. It's a really good discussion. Just wanted to say one thing. When you listen to all this stuff and these ideas, economic ideas, you think, oh, this is a little bit of a leftist policies. But what happened in our case, and I'm really proud to say that this is the case, we did not increase any taxes, yet we increased the welfare with about 1 million people went over the poverty line, mostly pensioners. That is huge without increasing taxes. So where does the money come from?
Tax collection.
Productivity.
It's tax collection, but actually the old boys clubs and corruption clubs that were set up were starting to be dried out. So for a first time, there was no discriminatory rules. There is no back dealing for a number of years. So what happened is the tax revenue came in because all of a sudden people that never paid taxes as they were supposed to pay taxes start paying taxes. At the same time, we increased the benefit to the poorest population. The strategy of this works really well because it's not a left policy because we're not increasing taxes, but it's not truly a right policy because we're bringing people up. The bottom is starting to go up. There is one drawback to this, and the drawback is that the people that are paying for this are the relatively powerful people in the country, and they have resources to hit back. So the whole game that we're trying to play is, can we sustain enough this strategy
To build the middle class.
to build the middle class, and so the people can see the value of it, while being at an extreme attack on fake news, media, everything they can imagine, because in the end of the day, they're paying for this economic growth model. But I'm really happy to say is that if so far we've been successful, I believe 1, 2, 3 years more, people start realizing that this fake news, anybody can say whatever they want on TV. If my income is growing and my business is growing and my infrastructure is happening, you start disregarding the rest. So now we're in a critical year for us this year that we have to continue with this while we know that the opponents also realize that every month they lose and we bring value to the middle class, there is less chance of this shift ever going back. So in this in mind, I really hope that we continue strong. The ports and the hubs happen, the infrastructure happens, and next year we can meet in Davos and we can tell you more good stories on the way.
Kiril, thank you very much.
Barbara, if I
Yes,
may.
we have another 3 minutes
I
left.
only need 1 minute. I'm very happy for this discussion. Niccolo Machiavelli, 6 centuries ago, taught us that in order to have prosperity, we need to have a government, he called it the princes, that don't care to be loved, but if needed, they care, like these two gentlemen, to inflict pain. And that pain is growing pains that leads to prosperity and a middle class. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us a wonderful lesson on how economic growth and well-being can be created. Ludwig Erhard would not have done it better, especially actually you have advanced it and brought it to the next millennium. Thanks for doing so and wishing you all good luck, not only to Bulgaria, but to Greece and to our Southeast Europe area to pick up the growth that we need in Western Europe that we lack. Thank you very much.